So let's get right to the business at hand here. I want to bring Mark Sargent on. How are you doing today, Mark?
I'm doing well, Sean. How about you?
I'm good. I'm a little tired because my little man got a little bit of a stomach flu, and he hasn't been able to hold anything down, so it's been a rough couple of nights.
Oh.
But,
I hear you.
2.5 years and he gets his first stomach flu. So the kid is very, very healthy otherwise. In fact, the last time we talked, and it's great to break words with you again, the last time we talked, I was fumbling around on Blog Talk Radio trying to figure out how to do a radio show. And I don't know if you remember, but we talked about my son who was born with a hole in his heart. And he had open heart surgery October 20th. And I just wanted to let you know he is fabulous. The cardiologist gave us the all clear. He's good to go. He had a heart defect, and he doesn't anymore.
That's great. That's good to hear.
That's wonderful. Many blessings and prayers were answered, absolutely. So, again, it's great to break words with you again, and let's talk some flat Earth. What have you been doing?
Oh, wow. I've been doing an awful lot since we've talked. When was the last thing we did? I don't have the date in front of me. I've got the folder from the old one when you were on, because you were on I won't even mention the network you were on. But a lot has happened in the last 12 months. I've done, 70 plus interviews. A book just came out 3 weeks ago that was published by Boogles out in London. They contacted me and said, we'd like to take your Flat Earth clues and turn it into a book. And I said, wow, that's wonderful. Fantastic. I didn't solicit anything along those lines. There's been a couple of apps, both for Flat Earth clues and my survival manual in both the Android and for iTunes. And on top of all of that, I've been doing, well, as you know, I've got a show on TFR called Strange World, and then I do another show with Patricia Steer called Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes, and we're only a couple weeks out from starting the first all Flat Earth network, and that's literally what's going to be called, the Flat Earth Network, and on there I'm going to be doing a daily show called The Flat Earth Show.
That's awesome.
I know, right? And if that wasn't enough, I've already done 14 subject matter experts, ranging from everybody in the military to a lot in the professional sector. The only group we haven't gotten really is either somebody in astrophysics or NASA. They all say the same thing. They say, look, the world doesn't look like it's spinning. It doesn't appear to have any curve, and the maps appear to be wrong.
The maps certainly are wrong. I say that, I still go into this flat Earth thing, and I've classified myself as a ball Earth skeptic because I can't really prove it anyway, but I wanted to let you know that I did it after our show. I actually did an impromptu experiment. We actually went out to Pyramid Lake in northern Nevada, and Pyramid Lake, for people who don't know, is sitting at about 4,500 feet, and it's a 24-mile long lake. And that night, we were sitting on the shore, and I got to set this up because this really made me scratch my head. Now, you are allowed to have a campfire at Pyramid Lake as long as it's within 10 meters or so from the shore. Now, this is a very flat lake. It's obviously desert. And so when you have within 10 meters, say 30 feet from the shore, you're pretty much right at water level, okay? So that's where you're allowed to have your campfires. Now, we had our campfire probably about 20 feet away from the shore, and it was just glass that night. It was absolute glass. It was a beautiful evening, and in fact, it was July 4th, so they were shooting fireworks off and whatnot. But about midnight, Mark, I did an impromptu experiment because I have a very good pair of binoculars. Now, we were at Pelican Point, and Pelican Point is a little bit of a peninsula right about in the middle of the lake, and it's about 12 miles away from the South Shore. Now, with my binoculars, Mark, I could clearly see campfires on the South Shore, which is about 12 miles away, and this really made me scratch my head.
I bet. Because at 12 miles, you would have been, and you were looking from beach to beach, basically.
Beach to beach across flat water.
Yeah, 12 miles, you shouldn't have been able to see that campfire. Because technically, it should be on the other side of the hill. Which is, if people are trying to imagine this, take a basketball or any ball you're looking at, eventually something that goes far enough away is going to be on the other side of the curve. And 12 miles, if you're looking beach to beach, that's more than enough to not be able to see it. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say, if my math is correct, it's supposed to be somewhere around 36 feet below my horizon.
Yeah, yeah. So if the curvature, again, this is round Earth math, not flat Earth math, which is mainstream science will say that the curvature of the Earth that we're living on is 8 inches per mile squared, which is 8 inches per mile times itself. So that's, if it's 12 miles, it's 12 times 12, which is 144, times 8 inches, which is plenty. Let's put it that way. If that's 36 feet, that's great. But that, yeah, so that campfire should not be visible from where you were looking. No.
Again, it really made me scratch my head. And, when I interviewed you last time, I watched Flat Earth Clues. And I had looked at Flat Earth 10 years ago, and I found it fascinating at the time. But I was buried in 9/11 research. I was buried in waking my butt up because ostrich effect, man, my head was way in the ground.
Sure.
So, and then I saw your movie Flat Earth Clues, or your clips, which then got into a full-blown movie on YouTube. And again, it really brought it back. And I said, well, the first thing I said, Marcus, I don't want to look at this. I don't want this. I don't want vision broken.
No, yeah. Nobody wants to look. You're preaching to the choir here. I collected. Most people don't know this. I used to collect antique globes as one of my little boring hobbies. I loved bookends. I thought there were some really cool bookends. Of course, nobody reads books anymore. And then the other thing was I collected antique globes because I loved the icon. I thought it was fantastic. So if anyone didn't want to give it up, it was me, because it's like, really? Because the globe icon was such a neat thing. But was it such a neat thing because we've been, spoon-fed it for so many years, starting from early childhood, to where we now know, we like the logo so much that it's just burned into our brains.
Absolutely burned it into our brains. In fact, Baby Liam, we have these little shows we watch. We don't have mainstream TV. We have Roku, but we watch YouTube videos a lot. And so many of them start off right off the bat. Here's your globe. Here's Mars. Here's Jupiter. All these globes bouncing around. So, I see the indoctrination right at the beginning of a child's life. And as we know, up until 500 years ago, everybody knew the Earth was flat.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I put a quote into my description of any YouTube video I know, and and I found this later on, which was from George Orwell, which I thought was fascinating. Most people know George Orwell for the book 1984, probably one of the most prophetic books. It gets more prophetic every year, and I read it in 1984 in high school. But he did a paper in the 40s. 1946 to be exact, talking about flat Earth. And in it, he said something very, very interesting where, in fact, I wonder if I still have it lying around here. No, but that's okay. I'll take a shot at it. Where basically he said, look, if you ask the average person on the street, how do they know they live on a globe? They'll all say the same thing. And that's why everybody knows, duh. And if you try to press them on it, they'll just get angry. Now, I thought that was very, very interesting that he would say that, because this was 1946. We didn't even have jet planes in 1946. Forget about NASA. So how did everybody know they were on a globe? And again, it's because of the conditioning. It's because you were told for 20 plus generations, from grandfather to father to son. We've all been told this. And there was no way to prove it, which, led me into the clues, which was, let's say you preach this thing for 20 generations and you're wrong. You finally find out later, after you get high enough to see it, if you're wrong. Do you tell the population? And unfortunately, no. Science is never going to do that. And some people have heard me say this before, and I don't know, and stop me if you've heard it, which is the Raiders of the Lost Ark scenario, which is, you remember Raiders of the Lost Ark, back from 1981, Harrison Ford.
Great movie.
Yeah, great movie. Where they were looking for the Ark. They were fighting for the Ark. The Americans, the Germans, the British, they're all looking for the Ark. At the very end, the Americans get it. But what happens in the last 60 seconds of that movie? They take the Ark, they put it into a box, and they put it into a warehouse, and no one ever gets to see it, ever. It never makes the light of day. And that is because that Ark goes against science. And if something goes against science, make no mistake about this, science is really not that much different when it comes to, than most religions, which is if something goes against it and they have the ability to remove it, to put it out of sight, that's exactly what they're going to do. The Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the Spear of Destiny, the Ring of Power from Lord of the Rings, doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, if it goes against science and it puts too many questions out there that science can't answer, They're not. Science is not going to let you show that, and which is why when people ask with the motivation, why would you hide this? Why would science keep this from it? It's like, wait, are you kidding? This puts a lot of scientists out of a job, and a whole bunch of the ones that aren't a job, they're going to have to start rewriting their books real quick. I mean, this turns academia upside down, especially when it comes to the physical sciences. So that's where we are now. I mean, the evidence just keeps mounting, and every person, I haven't had to solicit a single person that's come to me in the subject matter expert series that we've done, and we've done literally all 4 branches of the armed services. Flight instructor, career surveyor, international shipping agent, air traffic controller, master gunner. The one I did just last week, an aviation and ground training combat expert. They all reinforce the same view. In fact, nobody goes against each other. Nobody contradicts anybody. They all say the same thing. It's like, in fact, most of them, it's really interesting. Most of them will say, yeah, I can't prove it's a flat earth, but they'll tack on something again. They go, but what I can absolutely tell you is that we are not spinning. Whatever people tell you out there, it's like all the gauges, all the instruments we use, and some of them are very, very precise. They all say the same thing, which is we're not spinning. So the Coriolis effect is just not there. It doesn't matter, because remember the argument that people put forward, which they'll say, you see, if you do a time lapse, you see the stars spinning in the sky. And now we come back and say, is that the stars spinning in the sky, or is it? Is the Earth spinning, or are the stars spinning? Because it could go either way. But if you're on the flat Earth side, then the stars are spinning. And from my standpoint, again, it's no different than a planetarium. In which case the stars are spinning. We know that, but if you're laying in the planetarium and you're having a nice time and you're relaxing, it looks just like you would be if you were laying on your back in the middle of a field on a starry night.
Well, and I find it very interesting. No. Hey, that's good stuff, because I find it very interesting that, I'm not a believer in the heliocentric model, so I'm definitely geocentric. But I find it very interesting, and one of the things that hit me was the fact that the North Star has been used for navigation for thousands of years, probably longer than that, and everything seems to stay in the sky at the same time, same place. Now, if we're on a ball that's traveling some umpteen thousand miles through space in a solar system that, again, is traveling some umpteen thousand miles through space, spinning like some of them say we're in some sort of vortex. Why is everything so stationary? Why has it been there so long?
Excellent point. And for those people who didn't understand what he was saying just then, forget about the common speeds, like the Earth spinning at 1,000 miles an hour supposedly, and the Earth going around the sun at 60,000 miles an hour. What gets interesting is when you talk about the solar system flying through the Milky Way at 500,000 miles, 500,000 miles an hour, and then the Milky Way going even faster. But yet we don't see any parallax scrolling, no parallax movement when it comes to the stars, meaning if you're looking at the stars and you believe what mainstream science says, some are much closer than others. But if you know anything, like if you're driving down the highway, there's some objects are closer to you. If you look out the side window, some are farther away, and they all move at different speeds in relation to your car, because that's just how distance and perspective works. Why doesn't the same thing happen with stars? Like we see in science fiction movies. That just doesn't. We don't see any of that at all. The stars are always in the same place. They never move. And people say, well, because the distances are so vast that we just can't pick up on it. It's like, really? After all this time, we don't pick up on it ever, not even the slightest bit? I mean, there's too many little coincidences that mainstream science will throw at us that it just drives me insane, like how we only see one side of the moon, and exactly only one side of the moon. It doesn't even turn even a fraction of a degree off to where eventually we see the backside of the moon. We only see one side of the moon. They say, well, it's because it's locked in and its orbit is perfectly synced up with how the Earth orbits, and so it's always showing us the same face. And then if you think, oh, that's an interesting coincidence, well, it's also the moon is 400 times smaller than our sun, but it's also 400 times farther away or closer to us than the sun. So, which means when the moon is in front of the sun, it fits perfectly in front of the sun. And it's like, wow, it's a coincidence because that 400 thing I mentioned. Or it could be because the sun and the moon are the exact same size. But that's crazy. the moon and the sun can't be the same size. Might go on and on, but again, do the sticks and shadows. Vsauce, a popular YouTube guy who did a flat Earth video. It's got like 9 million hits, and he even mentions in his video, like you can show that the Earth is round and traveling through the solar system. Sorry, a sphere and traveling the solar system because of the sticks and shadows. Argument where you stick, you can measure different sticks and shadows with the sun, and it's like, yeah, that would and that would show, yeah, that the sun is 93 million miles away. Or it could also work if the sun was only 3,000 miles away and the sun was only like, say, 30, 35 miles wide. So it's like, okay, so why can't we pick that one? Well, because that one's crazy. Obviously, that's not going to happen. You can't pick that. The sun is vast. It's 93 million miles. Who said that? Well, mainstream science did. It's like, the same guys that told us that asbestos was a good idea. Those guys.
Science is a religion, and I think a lot of people are waking up to that. Ernest Holmes said, "quote, practically the whole human race is hypnotized because it thinks what somebody else told it to think."
Yes.
And I think. I really look at NASA and I look at science and I look at all the astrophysicists and Neil deGrasse Tyson, who obviously recently said that the Earth was more pear-shaped, but the pictures we see of Earth are actually to the pixel spherical.
Yeah. Yeah. Why didn't he backtrack from that? Which was, he goes to that university lecture and he mentions that the Earth is an oblate spheroid. And if you look up oblate spheroid in Wiki, it's obvious. It's a squished sphere. It's very squished, very pronounced, easy to determine, right? It's like you're stepping on top of a poorly inflated basketball. So why didn't he back off from that then? Why didn't he say, what I meant to say was, it's to the naked eye, it's a perfect sphere, but actually it's an oblate spheroid. Why didn't you say that? Why even bring up oblate spheroid? Why bring up pear-shaped? And only later in some of the radio interviews, he say, no, it's almost perfect, like a cue ball from a pool table. It's like, well, why? When does the word oblate even come into the conversation then? Who are you trying to impress? Unless you weren't supposed to say it, and he accidentally mentioned it during the thing.
Well, I think he's a supercilious, unmindful type person in any event, because he comes across as, it doesn't matter what you think. Science is the that's the end all tell all.
Yeah. That famous line that it's gonna. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure he takes that to his grave, where he says that science is right whether you believe in it or not. It's like, oh, dude, I've got such a lecture for you, about all these fun things. Anyway.
Talk about arrogance. We're gonna coming up on a break here, Mark, and when we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about these. You said you've been out there talking to pilots and military and whatnot. Yeah. I'm curious as to what when we come back from the break, I want to talk about if you've interviewed any railroad engineers, because that's another thing that's been making me scratch my head here recently. So it's great to have you on the show. Mark Sargent will be joining me for the entire show. Everybody stay tuned. The Awakening Liberty Show will be right back with more of this flat earth theory examination. It's great to be behind the microphone again on this Sunday. Happy Easter to everybody. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Awakening Liberty Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio. Second segment, I am being joined with Mark Sargent, founder of EnclosedWorld.com and also the creator of Flat Earth Clues. I want to remind phone lines in the second hour. If you've got any questions for Mark, if you've got any input onto this flat earth theory, whether you think it's real, whether you think it's not, call in and let's talk about it. Let's debate about it a little bit, but be respectful. If you're not respectful, you're out. So the number to call in is 866-37-TRUTH. Again, that number is 866-378-7884. And Mark, before the break, you were talking a little bit about the fact that you have gone and you've been, basically talking to military personnel and pilots and all kinds of things, and that they were not contradicting themselves. Just go into that again real quick, because I want people to understand that.
Oh, yeah. I started something initially. I didn't even think I was going to do a series when I first started it. It was a Navy guy had called me, and he was a United States Navy missile instructor for the Sparrow missile system. And he had contacted me again, unsolicited, out of the blue, and said, look, I think you may be onto something, because I've been in 10 years. I'm dealing with some really sophisticated systems, and we're painting targets, for example, ship to ship, not bouncing off the ionosphere or anything like that, going ship to ship at 60 miles, and 60 miles should be a couple thousand feet on the other side of the hill. And we're using a 2-inch beam radar, and we're painting targets. He goes, and guiding these missiles in. That shouldn't even be possible. And then that just started snowballing. So in order, the people that have come to me, well, not in order, sorry, I'm going to have to lump up some of the military guys. So I've had, and you can pick and choose any which ones you want here, but I've had United States Navy missile instructor, United States Air Force navigator, and that's, a tanker fueler, which was, really long haul stuff. United States Marine Corps sniper instructor, United States Navy submarine chief, U.S. Army artillery radar operator, an Australian intelligence officer, an American flight instructor, he was out of Iowa, an industrial engineer specializing in valves and seals, a career surveyor who spent 32 years doing big plots of land, international shipping expert, a corporate travel agent, an air traffic controller, United States Army master gunner, tank division, and then finally, just last week, an aviation and ground training expert. And all these guys, basically, when they started up, they all started complementing each other, and again, nobody. It wasn't just that they were all filling in the blanks for each other. They were also. Nobody was contradicting anything. So it wasn't, and they weren't all saying it's like, oh, I'm 100% sure that the Earth is flat, but they were agreeing with a lot of the theories the flat Earth movement has put out there. The first one being is that nobody can determine any curve whatsoever, and this is amazing. Like the submarine chief, which is basically just a plane underwater. He says, we're not adjusting for the curvature at all. The Air Force guy, both, the Air Force navigator who is a pilot and the American flight instructor who is a pilot, obviously, and the aviation and ground training combat expert, also a pilot. They all said the same thing, which is the gyros when they fire up, everything that when they're up there in the sky, it appears that the Earth is flat. Now, the first knee-jerk response for everyone says, well, you're saying that all pilots are in on it. And these guys be the first ones saying, no pilots are in on it, because no pilot would ever make that leap of faith. No pilot, I said this in one of the clues, if you're a pilot, the last thing, if you think the horizon looks flat and that the Earth looks flat, are you really going to think that the Earth is flat? No, of course not, because we're conditioned since we're children to think that the Earth is a sphere, which... Let me jump back here real quick, which is the argument I put out to people was just the general population at large was, how do you know you're on a sphere? Because this is something you're told. It's not something you know in real life. It's not something you've ever tested yourself. We all know water is wet, fire burns, you drop a pen, it falls to the floor. That appears to be something called gravity that pulls it to the ground. But when it comes to how do you know it's a sphere, you don't know. You're told this. You're told this by either a globe in your classroom or you read it in a textbook and you saw a picture from NASA. And you say, well, obviously the picture from NASA proves it. I was going, well, but people were giving us the same answers back in the 40s when there was no NASA. So how did people know that it was a sphere back then? It's because you're told. And these guys, all these subject matter experts, they all attack this thing in a different way, and nobody's come out against them, which is also amazing. So like I've never had a single military guy write me and say, it is a sphere. Here's why. You can shut up now. I've never had a surveyor. I've never had a flight instructor. I've never had anybody from the professional sector come out. The closest thing we got was, in fact, he didn't even email me directly, was a geodetic surveyor. But that's really kind of the same as an astronomer, because an astronomer starts out his day with, well, it's a solar system and all the planets around, everything spins around. Geodetic surveyor is the same thing, hence the name, geodetic. He believes the Earth is a sphere, and all his calculations are based off of the sphere. So he will never ever, he'll never shy away from that. But some of my favorites, weren't even necessarily the military guys. The military guys were good, but like the career surveyor who shot big tracts of land, everything from a shopping mall to an airport runway, big tracts of land. He was the one that was saying that, look, even by accident, we should have run into the curve by now, and it never really happened. Meaning, they said when you start out as a surveyor, you are told treat the world like it's absolutely perfectly flat, and treat your project like it's a small flat section on this perfectly flat world. And when you're young, eventually guys like this are saying, well, what happens about the curvature of the Earth? When do we have to deal with that? And they all say the same thing. They say, don't worry about it. Everyone's heard of the curvature, but no one's used it. Everyone's heard that the Earth is spinning, but nobody puts it into their firing solutions. Everything from the sniper instructor who shoots a bullet to the artillery guys to the missile guys, nobody takes into account the spinning of the Earth. And then one of the other guys I really, really loved was the the industrial engineer that specialized in valves and seals. He said, look, he goes, there's only like 5 companies in the world that deals with this because there's a lot of heavy duty stuff, valves and seals that you would put on submarines, big doors and hatches and things that open and close. And he goes, it's really strange because the ISS, the International Space Station up there, that should be using a lot of the same technology that submarines do, only in not as much steel, more aluminum. And he said, where there's so many things that aren't up on that thing that they should have. He goes, that station, I can't figure out how it functions at all. For example, he goes, for one, he goes, there should be a full-blown machine shop in there at all times because you've got to be making pieces for these doors and the seals, and it's got to be very, very precise. It's not something you can just ship up there. You've got to mill it on site. All the Navy ships, every ship that's at sea has a full-blown machine shop in the compartments because they make parts on the fly. This doesn't happen up on the ISS. And he goes, "Where's the doors? Why are there no doors that they're opening and shutting between hatches?" You get a single micrometeor in there. Apparently, it's open aired all the way. Not to mention, nobody's wearing spacesuits. They're all in Dockers khakis and polo shirts and socks. He goes, "What? One micrometeor, everybody dies." That's it.
You're not scrubs. It looks like sometimes to me. I don't get it either. I find that fascinating, and what you're doing is very cool. In fact, it's very pertinent. It needs to be done. I was doing some research into architects and engineers that build railroads and bridges.
Oh yeah.
And none of them say that they take into account the curvature of the earth when they're making a railroad line. And we're talking about hundreds of miles. We're talking about bridges that sometimes span, 10 miles, and some even longer than that. But they do not take into account the curvature of the earth. And I'm scratching my head, Mark. I'm going, what is going on here? Is everybody that bamboozled?
Yeah. Again, it's not that they've been tricked. It's just it's been hidden in plain sight, but we're conditioned at such a young age. Remember, this is the only thing we debunk to children. And I know we're going to be taking calls later, and some people are going to be like, "Holy smokes, you're insane." And I thought this too. In fact, everybody that goes up against this thing, everybody that becomes a flat Earth person, they start out trying to debunk it. So it's not as though. Like what you're saying, the bridge engineers and the railroad engineers, and I ran into a guy who was a pipeline engineer, and he goes, you think railroad lines are long and straight? He goes, try pipelines. We use some big chunks of pipe, and he goes, and they cover vast distances, as much as railroad lines in some cases, and he goes, they never take the curvature into effect. But back to the child thing, remember. We never teach children about any other conspiracy, either pro or con, ever when they're growing up. But what we do is we put a globe in the classroom when they're 6 years old, and we leave it there. That's all we have to do. That's some of the finest conditioning. I mean, the CIA is envious of this stuff because it sits there. And you say, "Oh yeah, this is where you live," and you tell them that for 12. If you finish high school, 12 years straight. And after that, that's it, which is why everybody has that same idea, which is, how do you know you're on a globe? Well, duh. But you're saying duh not because you know, but because you're conditioned to say that. Anybody that would ever say otherwise has got to be insane. They've got to be crazy. Why would you ever say it's flat? We're all told that you're told again and again. It's reinforced in your head so many times. How many globes, how many corporate logos, how many times do we see it in movies and television and book covers and magazine covers and textbooks? We see this our entire lives. So yeah, your first reaction, I kind of joke with people, but I'm not joking. I say, look, if you don't think it's crazy, then there's probably something wrong with you. Because I've run into it almost every time. In fact, it's so rare. I mean, it's less than 1% of the population. If I talk to someone, I say, "Oh yeah, by the way, what do you think about the idea of the Earth being flat?" Everybody is the same thing. It's like, "Oh, that's nuts," or they laugh it off. And when I put it in one of my clues, I said, "Look, I've talked to people that consider themselves to be hardcore conspiracy guys, and." They believe in everything from Bigfoot to Loch Ness to the World Trade Center to Boston bombing, whatever it is. They believe everything is a conspiracy. And I say flat Earth, and they'll go, "Get out of here, get out of the room. Yeah, I don't even want to talk to you." How is that possible?
I have friends, I'll just mention flat Earth, and they're like, that's absolutely insane. But then in the very next statement, they're talking about how Obama's a time traveler and reptilians live in the middle of the Earth. And it blows my mind, Mark.
Yeah.
I'm a little encouraged because I've mentioned flat Earth to 4 or 5 people that I know who I see on a regular basis. And everybody knows I'm a friend of Bill W. I attend 12-step meetings. And these people are, they're all recovering and they're all going through their own lives. But I've mentioned this to 4 or 5 people, and now they're all over it, Mark. They're like, wow, this is just amazing. And they've come to me and thanked me. And, your movie, your Flat Earth Clues, is the first place I send them.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it is a gateway drug, no question. Other people have done a lot more advanced stuff. In fact, there isn't even really an ounce of math anywhere, and I did that deliberately in any of the clues that I did because I didn't want to gloss anybody over. I didn't want to get them to where they were like, oh, math and theories and all this other stuff that I hated in high school. I don't want to deal with that. And it is grown to the point now where it is – I think we've gone past the stage of well, obviously since you and I have talked last, that whole B.O.B. Neil deGrasse Tyson thing happened, which was only a couple of months ago, and that was amazing. Where for those who don't remember this, B.O.B. A Grammy-nominated rapper came out and made a song, literally a flat Earth song called Flatline, and included a 60-second clip of Neil deGrasse Tyson addressing those students about the oblate spheroid thing. Mm-hmm. And Neil deGrasse Tyson came out, surprising to me. It wasn't that the rapper came out and made that. I mean, that was pretty surprising, sure. But what was really more surprising was that Neil deGrasse Tyson started tweeting against it within 12 hours and got in this Twitter battle and then went on primetime television and did a couple monologues against it. On very, very quickly. He had to book those things almost immediately. One was on Comedy Central. I can't remember where the other one was. And why would you do this? Why would you even dignify yourself by going after this unless you wanted to put in? And so all of a sudden, once that happened, that combination, it reached 100% saturation in mainstream media as far as just the introduction to the topic. Everybody from Time Magazine to NPR to Vanity Fair, everybody covered it. It was in the Wall Street Journal, because it was an interesting story. And then it kind of, nobody's really talked about it since then, but that's okay. Well, except for Leonardo DiCaprio and the Pope, but that's a whole other thing for another time. But it's gotten weird now to where people are at least looking. I mean, the debate is raging, but what you were saying about your friends, once you look into it, it really becomes a Pandora's box. In fact, the only way you can be immune from it is if you don't open the box. You open the box and you stare at what is in the box for, 60 seconds and really look at it. Not just look at it and go, I'm not even going to look what's in there. Like if you stare at it, you're going to be hooked. And then the emails come that I get and people say, oh yeah, I didn't sleep for 4 or 5 days because I've just been watching flat Earth videos. And it's been exciting. I
was wrapped around this again. Like I said, I studied it 10 years ago and I left it because there were so many other things going on in the world that I felt were more pertinent at the time. And to some degree, I still feel that way. Yeah. Is the Earth flat? Probably. Does it matter right now when we got chemtrails and vaccines and fracking going on all over the world, and these wacko psychopaths who have taken control and hijacked everybody with the banks? We've got some big fish to fry here. And
sure.
Used to take on. But let me ask you this, because we were talking about the spinning ball, and I am unequivocally convinced whether we are flat or whether we're under a dome or whether we're concave, convex, whatever it is, I am convinced that we are not spinning. And one of the things that really struck me was when I started looking at, number one, flight times, and we'll get into that in a minute, but second of all, this Red Bull jump. This guy up 3 hours it took him to get to 104,000 feet. Now, he was in Arizona, I believe, and at the equator, we're supposed to be spinning, say, 1,000 miles an hour, and obviously it goes down as you go to either the poles. But let's just say 600, 700 miles an hour in Arizona, and he goes up 3 hours to 104,000 feet. Now, by the time he jumped, he should have been well over the Pacific, but yet he 75 miles to the east. Now, that doesn't make any sense, Mark.
No, it doesn't. The Earth spinning is it has a lot of little facets to it, and one of which is the east to west, west to east argument, which is if the Earth is spinning, say 1,000 miles an hour at the equator, let's say 700 miles an hour, whatever it is in the middle of the United States, then shouldn't planes that are going east have a really, really tough time catching up because they're going with the spin? I'm sorry, is that against the spin? With the spin? No, they're going against it. East to west, you go with it. So why doesn't that happen? And they'll say, well, the atmosphere, gravity locks it down. The gravity locks down the atmosphere and any objects in it. It's like, really? Because they're in the atmosphere and they're traveling. And these same people will say, well, a bullet, it leaves the atmosphere, it leaves the Earth. So you have to take into account the spin of the Earth. I'm going, well, what about airplanes? They don't count because the airplane is really a ballistic object. I mean, it's a slower moving missile, no different than a bullet or a artillery shell. Why, or an actual missile? Why doesn't the airplane count? And the scientists won't address it, which is really, really strange. But with a balloon, you're absolutely right. And people have theorized this for years and years and years, which is, let's take a balloon, go straight up, and if we go straight up, shouldn't the Earth curve out from underneath us? And they'll say, no, gravity's holding that balloon, it's moving it relative with it. No different than if you're in an airplane, every object in that airplane is moving with you. So when you throw a ball up in the air in an airplane, it just doesn't punch out the back of the plane. I was going, I don't know if that actually applies if we're talking about open atmosphere though, and if you're going to go to that road, then you get into the whole vacuum argument. Which, in fact, let's stay on the spin for a second. The spin is really good because there's some interesting things about the spin. For example, we all know when we're on a merry-go-round, when we're children, if you're standing in the center of the merry-go-round, you just spin in a circle. But if you're on the edge of the merry-go-round, the faster it goes, the harder it is to stay on to that merry-go-round. Well, the same thing applies. It's called centrifugal force. So if that force at the equator is like the outside of a merry-go-round, and at the North Pole it's zero, you're spinning at 0 degrees and there's zero force, then shouldn't objects at the equator weigh slightly less because they're trying to be thrown off the Earth? If that's the case, if you take a 100-pound weight at the North Pole, weigh it at the North Pole, say, oh, it's 100 pounds. You take it to the equator, shouldn't it weigh a little bit less? And if you're saying, well, maybe only an ounce or two, okay, well then factor in the oceans, for example, because we all know water moves extremely easy when it comes to gravity. Anyone knows that? Just try making a hard left turn or a hard right turn in your car with a cup of coffee in your hand. You know that water moves. So if the Earth is spinning 1,000 miles an hour, how are the oceans still staying uniform on the ball? I mean, I get it. Yeah, I get the whole theory, and that is, and I buy some of it. And it's like, okay, fine. If you take a big ball in space and you cover it in water, will the water stay? Considering it's a uniform ball, will the water be on there uniformly? And it's like, I could see that, but not if the ball's spinning. If the ball's spinning, that water is going to pool up. It's going to start going down from the North Pole and the South Pole, and there's going to be these big bulges of water. And the North Pole and the South Pole aren't going to have much of oceans. There's going to be thin, if not bald spots at the top and the bottom of that. So why isn't that happening? In fact, why we don't see that even remotely.
Just a real simple experiment is go and take a tennis ball and dunk it in water and spin that ball and see what happens to the water.
Yeah.
The water flies off into space.
Water flies off. And I know they'll say gravity is the answer for all this, and I know they'll say that the gravity keeps it all on there. It's like, but does it counteract everything so completely that it even counteracts every effect of centrifugal force? Force? No.
Well, and gravity, it's still a theory. Go look it up on Wikipedia. It says the theory of gravity. It's a theory. Do we even know? That's another one. People think gravity exists, but it's still a theory.
Yeah. Until you can get into space and take a separate object, like a dense object, and you can actually show an experiment where you take a ball and, oh, look, it gets attracted to that object. What have you done? You can't do that. And you obviously can't do it here. And so people say, oh, what's gravity on? They say, oh, flat earthers don't believe in gravity. It's like, now that we don't believe in gravity, tell us what gravity is. Because what is it on when they say what's gravity on a flat Earth, I go, what is it on a ball? If you're saying that gravity is density and that you've got this big dense mass and that the objects are pulled into it, yeah, maybe, but why couldn't that exist on a flat Earth as well? If it's underneath and they say, well, how things are laid out and the thickness of the Earth, I'm going, yeah, but then that's when I got into my argument with the clue. It's like, yeah, you can talk about the thickness all you want, but if it's 4,000 miles to the center of the Earth, what do you know it's in the center of the Earth? I go, how far down you've gone down? And they say, well, numbers aren't important. I was going, so you've gone down 2,000 miles? That's halfway? How about 1,000? How about 100? How about 10? No, you've only drilled down 8 miles. That's the deepest hole anyone's ever drilled. And below that, you have no idea what's below that. They say, well, seismic waves, and we can kind of bounce things off. We got a pretty good idea what's down there. Going, really? Because that's the equivalent of knocking on the side of a coconut for the first time. You're knocking on it, but you don't really know until you get in it. Plus, that doesn't explain how you define the cores of all the other planets. You want to define ours, that's one thing, but it doesn't make it, again, I shouldn't pick on science too much, but they've gotten quite complacent over the years. Whereas we've all seen the cross sections of the Earth, the cutaway section where you have red and orange and yellow and white. Right? You've seen all those cross sections, and you're pretty confident that's what it looks like. But you've only drilled down 8 miles. You haven't even touched the red part yet. So why? What's this cross section you're showing to all the kids? Why don't you just put a cross section and put a big question mark in the center? And that's because science won't do that. They don't like question marks. They're just going to say this is what it is until they're proven wrong, and then they'll backtrack and say, well, actually, that's when you know you're in trouble, when the conversation starts out with, well, actually. Right. Scientists were surprised to find out that the inside of the Earth was actually made of cork.
Scientists are shocked. The moon is made out of Swiss cheese.
Exactly. You hear those, and they retract things, but they don't retract the stuff that's harmful to us. And I don't want to go off on a rant too much, but people say, when Neil deGrasse Tyson says that science is right whether you believe in it or not, I throw things back. You mean forget about the military stuff they devised, all those horrible, horrible weapons that, nerve gas and napalm and atomic weapons. Look at the consumer products. Science is always right. So you were right when you made lead paint or lead gasoline or DDT, or I'm pretty sure people are still getting paid for asbestos. And you were,
it's great for you.
Yeah. You were the guys that told the cigarette companies they could have doctors advertise cigarettes on television. You were the ones that told the companies that they could have the Flintstones put cigarettes on their cartoons. It just gets and oh, by the way, you were also the ones that told us that the Earth was the cross section of the Earth, even though you had no idea what was inside it. So when people say that science wouldn't lie to us about the shape of the Earth, of course they would. They'd have to, because they don't want to, you heard the saying, work yourself out of a job. That's exactly what it was. They'd announce this and then they would be fired immediately. Anyone that was an astrophysicist, anyone that was an astronomer, radio telescope operator, any of the physical sciences, take your pick, geology, hydrology, archaeology, biology, anything with an ology next to it. Those all have to be completely retooled, and they're not going to do it. They're going to look after like anybody. Look, who's I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say that we don't all look after our self-interest. If you're an oil company and you find a plant that mysteriously has properties that simulate oil and it's easy to grow and anybody can grow it in their backyard, you think that plant is ever going to see the light of day? No. Yeah. If you're a
Hold on, Mark. We're coming up on a break, and I want to mention real quick before we get to the break, when people talk about gravity and flat Earth, because it always comes up, and people say it's gravity and that the atmosphere is moving and it's all being locked in by gravity. Gravity is a theory, and my response to that is number one, they can't prove it. It's still a theory. Number two, they can't reproduce it, and they can't measure it. And I look at, and my response is always the same thing, Mark. It's buoyancy.
There you go.
Buoyancy is far more explainable than as to what's going on in this world, and I really think that that's the key, because that we can prove, that we can see, that we can actually reproduce, that we can measure. I think that's probably the best response for the gravity deal. And again, I'm a baller skeptic. I'm certainly not believing that we are spinning through space. So that's where I stand on this whole thing. When we come back, we're going to explore this even more, and we're going to open up the phone line. So if you got a question for Mark, feel free to call in. I know it's Easter Sunday. Some people are probably with their families, but actually it looks like we have a lot of people in the chat room today, and the numbers look pretty good. So anyway, call in. We'll be right back. The Awakening Liberty Show with Mark Sargent.
Sean, is your mic on? I'm Mark Sargent, and I'm filling in for Sean Karen on the Awakening Liberty Show because Sean seems to be out at the moment. But let me try to chat him up real quick. Sean, can you see this?
Yeah, we're here.
Oh, good. Was wondering. I was going to start spinning records. Your mic's, you're breaking up. Do not know what's happening with Sean.
Well, I was playing a clip there, but I'm not sure anybody could hear it.
No, nobody could hear it. I think it was cutting out you as well. What was it a clip of?
It was a clip of Obama, and I'm not sure.
The Flat Earth Society one mentioned?
Yeah, the Flat Earth Society mentioned, and I don't know why that wasn't working. Normally it works great.
It happens. No worries.
Yeah, that's the way it is. But anyway, I wanted to play that clip, and for those of you who don't know it, I mean, obviously Obama actually went ahead and mentioned this whole Flat Earth thing, said we don't have time for the Flat Earth Society, a meeting of the Flat Earth Society. But and we played this on the clip on the show I did with you last time, and I thought it was so pertinent because in the following of that message that he was saying in the speech, he said he was talking about the political leaders that they were given the ability to lead beyond the scope of the horizon and the arc of their careers. And I thought it was very interesting in that clip.
That is interesting.
Yeah, he mentions these words, horizon and arc, after mentioning we don't have time for the Flat Earth Society.
Yeah.
Which just blew me away when I heard that. And unfortunately, I don't know why it's not playing on the deal, but that happens.
Yeah.
So anyway, what were your thoughts when he said that?
Well, initially, I because that clip had been around for a while. That clip was at least 6 months before I even did my first clue, which was February of last year, 2015. And that was the previous summer. I think it was 2014. And it's interesting because people have said, is it possible that that they saw this coming? And it's like, yeah, it's more than possible. They probably have helped it along. And having him mention it, as people know, speeches, especially presidents of the United States, nothing happens by accident. There's no off-the-cuff remarks. They read off the teleprompter or they read off their cue cards. They don't go off script. And so when he mentions in passing that about climate change, we're willing to meet with everybody, but then he goes, we don't have time though for the meeting of the Flat Earth Society. Very interesting, because he was equating it with everything is possible except that. Everything is on the table except that. Why would you go out of your way to say that? In fact, why even bring it up at all? It's like they were trying to create a dialogue against Flat Earth, trying to equate Flat Earth with crazy. And even Neil deGrasse Tyson was doing the same thing when he came on Bloomberg and CNN last year. And you can find these online. They're not hard to find. Where he's telling the people on the air, he's saying, when a science has a debate and we're coming from the sphere side, you shouldn't give equal time to the flat earthers. Now, why would you say this on air when you can do that during a production meeting? When you tell the producers off camera, usually behind closed doors, say, look, don't talk about the flat earthers. You can't, you know what I'm saying? It's like you can't not talk about it by talking about it. You don't go on air and it's the old joke. It's like make sure nobody says banana hammock. Nobody says that, right? Because everyone, that's all. What's the first thing anyone, you're telling kids, don't eat the cookie. It's like you're making the kids aware of the cookie in the first place. Right. And it's just fascinating watching all that's happening, because in some ways it looks like they're resisting it, but in other ways it looks like they are the ones that are really helping this thing along. And that's been my feeling now for the last, 9 months.
Yeah, it seems to me that they may actually, like I said, is the Earth flat? Probably, but again, a lot of people call it a psyop because they're trying to maneuver people away from the other issues like the vaccine agenda, the fracking agenda, the chemtrails, and the geoengineering and the GMO foods. It's almost like they're trying to give them something else to look at. It's like, look over here and pay attention to this.
And I would agree with you to some extent. That's going to be – I've got a debate coming up, I think, with Max Egan, with a couple other people from the Flat Earth Movement on, I believe, Thursday. And Max is fully along that road. It's like, how the atrocities in Syria, how can that – how can you compare what you're looking at to that? And by the way, the vaccine, little side note of the vaccine, is just before the show came on, I saw that headline where Robert De Niro pulled the film. He just pulled it in the last couple hours, where the vaccination film that was going to run at the Tribeca Film Festival is now not going to run because you know what happened full well. The big pharma called him and said, "You're open to litigation if you do this. You go down this road, and we are going to come after everything that you are, and you won't have a legacy by the time we're done with you. We'll wrap you up in court." For
those of you who don't know, that film was called Vax Free, and it's. It is a big point of contention, and actually, De Niro has an autistic child.
Yeah, and that's why he was going to go with it. So you knew that there must have been some heavy hands at play if he pulled it and did it publicly. He had to release a statement in the whole 9 yards. It's like.
I did an interview with Joshua Cook from Truth and Media just a couple of weeks ago, and they did that documentary about William Thompson and the vaccines, and they did it really, really well, and they did it in such a way that they really promoted the facts, and I really appreciated them for doing it that way, because so many of us who were in the vaccine truth movement, including myself, my son is vax-free. He got his first little bug. He's 2.5 years old. He's doing absolutely fabulous. He's awesomely healthy, but he kicked it too, really, really fast. So. Big issue. So
can I spend a couple seconds going on the vaccine?
Yeah, and then we'll to the callers. We got some callers on.
Oh yeah. By the way, before the callers, a quick shout out to because I know she's listening. My co-host from Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes, Patricia Steer. You know her, you love her, or sometimes you don't love her, but she's always memorable. So shout out to her. But the vaccine thing, real quick. The reason why it bugged me is it's such a simple concept, but people aren't getting it, and that is, look, because I'm older. I'm in my late 40s. So when I was growing up, we had like 6 vaccines, and 6 vaccines isn't that tough a thing because you're only running against the blood types and your other vaccines. You only have to do the tests on these other 6 and the combinations of. And when the pharmaceutical companies figured out they could make more money by making more vaccines, kids through more vaccines, then every time you up a vaccine, when it goes from 6 to 8 and 8 to 10 and 10 to 12, it becomes exponentially harder to test because remember, there's 8 blood types in the world. You get to 20 vaccines with those 8 blood types and then all the different things that are happening when your body chemistry is at a younger age, you can't test for everything. So if there's a combination that promotes autism, the problem is that no pharmaceutical company is going to come out and admit it because it's a class action lawsuit, which means the end of that company. So it's the Fight Club argument, which that is if the cost of the cost of the lawsuit is less than the cost of a recall, we don't do one. And that's what everyone's holding their breath for. They're going to fight it tooth and nail all the way to the end. And I feel bad because it's a simple concept, but I get it. It's all money, and they're going to protect their own interests. So anyway, there's my rant.
And the vaccine manufacturers, absolutely, most people don't realize this, but they have zero liability for any damages that their products cause. That's a big red flag, people. And the one-size-fits-all vaccine agenda doesn't work. Do some vaccines probably work? Probably, maybe, possibly. Maybe. But are they also injecting people full of toxins? It's a big passion of mine, Mark, and I've interviewed so many people, Dr. Rima Leibach, Judy Mikovits, amazing stuff.
But you're absolutely right. Whereas this is way different than people say, well, it'll work itself out like cigarettes did. It's like, no, it won't. Because the only reason cigarettes got in hot water is because the health insurance industry was, with all their money, were saying, look, we don't want to pay any more claims. So let's get a whole bunch of more doctors and labs to come out against cigarettes and prove what this thing really is. With autism, that doesn't happen. Because where's the money going to come from? Where's the research going to come from? From the parents? This is going to get worse before it gets better. I guarantee it.
I agree. All right, let's go to the phones. We got a wireless caller from Hawaii. Hello, you are live on the Awakening Liberty Show. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent. You got a question for myself or for Mark?
Yeah. So Mark was on with Steve, I believe, the Aviation Ground Force guy. That was pretty epic of a show. I was just wondering, what was exactly that show about? Too, was that about the flat Earth?
Oh, absolutely, it was. I only do flat Earth shows. In fact, every video I've ever done on YouTube, every show on TFR, every interview I've ever done has been 90% flat Earth.
Oh, nice. And then I was also wondering, I totally kind of buying into this flat Earth thing, but then it opens up doors for levitation and all kinds of crazy stuff. That's how I feel about it.
Flat Earth is Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh,
would it just be sitting still or rising or descending?
Is the flat Earth ascending or descending?
Yeah.
I don't think it's doing either. I believe that gravity on a flat Earth is really similar to what gravity is on a round Earth. In fact, on a flat Earth, I think it's much easier. I think it's a form of molecular magnetism, where we all know that magnets attract metal. But what if you had a magnetic field that could attract organics, everything from dirt to water? If you have that underneath you, what's the difference between that and what we label as gravity? My argument is nothing.
Yeah, I would agree. And magnetism and buoyancy, again, can certainly take the place of everything that they say gravity does. And again, gravity is a theory. Have you got any more questions there, caller from Hawaii?
I do have a few, but I can't get them right now, so maybe I'll call back.
Okay. Great. Well, thank you so much for calling in, and we're going to go on to the next caller. We've got a caller from Charlotte, North Carolina. Charlotte, North Carolina, you are live on the Awakening Liberty Show. How are you doing today?
Hi. I'd like to address an issue that he brought up about how the people in science can't get honest because it would be a threat to their livelihood. And we have to address this idea of livelihood because it's not just science, it's corrupt government, psychology, medicine, all of these things. Now, if you think of it, people say how we're slaves. Okay, well, people just tend to think slave and master, but it doesn't work that way. You have slave, you have field slaves, house slaves, which is like the professional class, overseers, which is like the government, military, police, and bureaucrats, and then you have masters at the top. The masters cannot control the population without the aid of the overseers and the house slaves, you see, which are like the professional class and the government class. So the thing is, it's like a pyramid, and like too many people, like in Patriot Radio, love to focus on the faults of the elite and the base of the pyramid, the underclass. But the thing is, the middle of the pyramid is what holds the bottom down and the top up. And their fear of becoming in the bottom and a field slave is what tempts them to be dishonest. The thing is, until we can come up with some solution to where people can become honest, because really it's the middle class, and when I bring this up, people don't like talking about it because it hits too close to home, their friends, their family, themselves. It's the middle class, not all of it, not small businesses and stuff, but large sections of the middle class are actually what are holding this tyranny in place and corrupt science and all the in institutions. And to me, until we address this issue, we will have no change.
She got a point there. George Carlin, I think, said it best when he said that the poor were just there to scare the crap out of the middle class. And that's their motivation, that the middle class won't do anything because of fear of getting knocked down a couple rungs into a place in life where they don't want to be. But to your point,
it's about hierarchy.
Yeah. And you're right.
And it's more comfortable at the top than the bottom.
Yeah, Yeah, and you're right. It's not just about scientists. Again, everybody tries to protect their self-interest. There was something I came up with the other day, which was, let's say the diamond companies found a different stone that was like a diamond, but even better, a different color and stronger and all this stuff. Even if all these things were true, they would never release it because the infrastructure for the diamond industry is so set in place. No play on words there. That they couldn't do it even if they wanted to, because it would knock off too many things in their own industry. So everybody tries to protect what they have. Everybody tries to keep what they have or advance it. And most people, through greed and power, will try to keep the status quo.
Yes, and caller, you made some great points.
I just wish.
Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, you're there.
Well, it's just that you people that have a larger platform, because I want change. I want a better life for everyone. This is just wrong. Like I say, look at all the money siphoned off to NASA. Where the hell is it going? But you see, the people who are the beneficiaries of the status quo, they don't want change. It's the people who are being hurt that want change. The people who are, they're quite comfortable. They are going to fight it tooth and nail because of livelihood. And then they also, what they do, they lie to themselves about what they're doing. They're not dumb people in the professional classes, which they're quite good at being able to rationalize and lie to themselves, so they don't have to see themselves for what they are and suffer the pain of appropriate guilt.
Those are great points, and I want to thank you for calling into the Awakening Liberty Show. You made some great points, and I want to. This kind of actually segued into what I wanted to get into, was the agenda behind Flat Earth. And she's making some really great points about the fact that this hierarchy and these people at the top, and she called them the elites, and I don't like using that word anymore. I call them the ruling class parasites. Yeah. These people, they really do not care. They have all the money they need. They have all the power they need. They have, what they don't have is all the control. And this whole thing is a control structure. And they are manipulating and deceiving everybody into a situation where they will become slaves who actually love their servitude. And this is being done, again, going back to the vaccines, the chemtrails, manipulation through DNA in our foods. They're dumbing down the population. You look at things like Russell Bertrand, what he talked about. They have done this. And this is what they're doing. And the question comes up, why would they lie to us about the shape of the Earth? Why would they perpetrate this NASA fraud, Mark?
Well, there's a couple reasons. The first was there's a primary and a secondary reason. The short-term reason was because if you take the world back in 1956, 1957, when you find out, and they probably, like any lie, the longer you hide it, the worse it gets. If people think I'm kidding there, it's the old analogy where the wife has been the husband's been cheating on the wife, and it's when she hears that he's only been cheating for a year, doesn't sound that bad. But when she finds out he's been cheating for 20 years, that's a whole different animal. So let's say you are the power elite. I call them the authority. They make up the super rich, the royals, and the governments. That power doesn't want to lose their structure, the infrastructure. So you find out that the world isn't what it's shaped to be like. What happens in that case? Well, forget about the academic part. We all know that's going to happen, and forget about the economic part. That's also a secondary aspect of it. What's also the two big ones though are the religious aspect. And that by I mean you take the big five religions that are in this world that control 80% of the population: Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. All these groups, any religion has really been looking for forever is looking for that magical artifact, that reinforces God, that shows them, the Ark of the Covenant, the Holy Grail, the Spear of Destiny. Take your pick. They've all been looking for it. What if that actually existed? What if there was proof, and science hates for me to use this word, which is intelligent design? What if there was the handprint of God, which was this structure, and you could prove, because if it is built, if there is a structure to this thing, if you are inside this giant dome, then it was created by a creator, and there's your God, or at least a godlike being, at the very least. It's tough to be an atheist in this. No government's going to want that to come out, because at that point you're running the risk of letting religion have power, which they have wielded before, and not exactly smoothly back in the day. Don't forget the Inquisition, the Dark Ages, some not fun times. They're not going to take that chance. So once they found out, it's like, okay, all we have to do is spend money, create a few science projects, and see, bury this thing for as long as we can. And when that happens, and then we can release it when we think it's necessary, to finally let it come forward, because you can use it for a secondary purpose. And that's kind of what I've been working on for the last, 6-9 months, which is because, it feels like this way it's a setup for something else. No question that there's something going on. Some people say, oh, it's a distraction to make conspiracy people look crazy. It's a distraction to keep us from looking at other conspiracies. Well, maybe, but maybe it's even bigger than that. Maybe it's a distraction to set up. Maybe it's the groundwork. Maybe it's the foundation for something even bigger, if that's possible. What's bigger than flat Earth? It's like, well, flat Earth is the sign of proof of God, for lack of a better term. Well, then maybe it's something. Maybe God shows up, or maybe someone shows up claiming to be God or God-like. How hard would it be to transition from, oh yeah, by the way, the Earth is flat, and this person, this really big spaceship over here, they say they built it. That's a 1-2 combo that a big chunk of the world would go for, and it would be.
Mark, sorry, I look at this from a Christian. Everybody knows I'm a Christian. Yeah. And I take the Bible literally in many ways. And what you asked the question is that what is it? Is it something bigger? Well, I actually do believe it's something bigger. In fact, I believe, and again, you mentioned that the governments don't want to lose their control structure, but I really believe this is Luciferian and satanic, because I look at these people who are in power and the things they do. They're involved in pedophilia. They're involved in mass mind manipulation to get people to go to war. So they're killing people, seemingly all for their own pleasure. And it is, in my opinion, part of this agenda is to separate man from the true creator, from the Most High God, from the universe, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
It is get you back into this state of non-spirituality, or into a situation where you are being manipulated into Luciferianism and the satanic agenda. Yeah. That's how big I think this is.
Yeah. I mean, I've had several people email me saying, is it possible that this is going to be led up to a false second coming, or the real second coming? Or, are we talking about, because remember, that's one of the clues, I think it was clue 10, was called hiding God. And that is, if you had the ability, as ridiculous as it sounds, to hide proof of God from all the people in the world that have been wanting it. I mean, everybody has prayed for some sort of divine intervention or a sign at least once in their life. If you hid even the glimmer of that from people, talk about that's probably the worst evil I can think of. Right. And that is keeping people away from knowing their place in the universe.
Well, and the Bible tells us that there is a great deception coming, and I have come to believe that the deception is not coming. It is here. It is now. We are living in that deception, and everything that I see going on in the world is so evil. It's so profoundly evil. And the fact that these people who are running the show are profoundly evil, and that they are pressing everybody through these banks and these banking cabals, these false flag events on all over the world. So much fiction, so many lies in the media, and it's just a carryover into really the shape of the earth. Yeah. Does it really matter? For me, my faith is so strong in God that I have come to believe that I question everything now. I absolutely question everything, much to my dismay. But I stick to that. I stick to that faith, and it's like, God's got this under control, and these people want me to bend to their will and their one world government, and that's not going to happen. So I'm doing everything I can to fight it, Mark.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I know you got to go to break here in a minute, but I know you also want to do calls later. But I want to bring up sometime, remind me, which is because people say, what does it matter? Because I get that probably 1 out of every 10 or 12 emails where it's like, it doesn't matter whether the Earth's flat or round. I was going, well, it doesn't until the day it does. Until it does, it's like it's so big that it's just a theory. It's like, there's bigger, there's smaller things to work about, to work with. But once it happens, then it becomes, trust me when I say this, it becomes the only topic, which is why the flat earthers have been kind of getting into it now. They're obsessed with it. And they kind of say, they look at other people that look at other things and they say, why would you look at anything else? But that's when it comes out, it will be the only topic talked about for a long time, or at least until something bigger comes out.
Yeah, and I don't know that we'll actually ever get to that point because the way it looks to me, it looks like they're going to try to depopulate. They're going to get rid of a lot of people so they can maintain this lie. Too many people are waking up. So we are going to be coming back to the last segment of the Awakening Liberty Show right here on truthfrequencyradio.com. Shane Virtue, I got you on the call board. We'll be taking you right after the break. And then I do have a question from the chat room that I want to address to Mark as well. And everybody stay tuned. We got a lot more coming up here with Mark Sargent and Flat Earth Clues, the Flat Earth Debate, real, psyop, distraction, mass deception. What is it all about? The Awakening Liberty Show will be right back, so stay tuned. And we are back, the Awakening Liberty Show, right here on truthfrequencyradio.com, all across America, all around the world. The number to call in is 866-37-TRUTH. Again, that number is 866-378-7884. My guest this show has been Mark Sargent, creator of the Flat Earth Clues. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you go and look at it. Just take a look at it. It's going to make you scratch your head, but it will explain a lot about what the Flat Earth movement is. And it will get you first to question NASA, because I think you got to wrap your head around that. Before we get into NASA a little bit, I'm going to talk about that. We got a couple of questions. The first one coming from the chat room, and I think it was Dre that asked about the apparent asteroid impacts and all of the craters on the Earth. If we are in an enclosed world or under a dome, how are they getting in? Is this a one-way street or is it a two-way street, Mark?
One-way street. Anyone that has the ability, and I know it is such a huge concept and it's so tough for people to get their head around. If you have the ability to build a structure that's, say, 20,000 miles wide and, let's say, 4,000 miles high, if you have that sort of technology, simulating actual asteroids hitting is no tougher than throwing a rock into an aquarium. You know, throwing a piece of metal ore at speed, shallow angle, at the atmosphere, burn it up, try not to, aim for any of the major cities, which is why that thing in Russia, a few years back was a little dicey. And that's all you need to do. It's a great reinforcement tool, and why not? I remember, because you're trying to simulate space. You're trying to simulate a giant planetarium. So it's not necessarily essential, but it's a nice touch having meteors come in, and comets that don't. So comets that fly across the sky but don't actually come in.
Exactly. And you mentioned in your ad there during the break that, talking about lunar waves. I got to get Crow back on the show because that lunar wave stuff is absolutely bizarre to me. And being a video expert, I can't debunk it. I don't know what it is. Yeah. It really bothers me.
Yeah. I mean, when I saw it, because I've been dealing with computers for so many years, when I saw it the first time, and remember, Crow's not even a flat earther. He just takes really good shots of the moon, and I still use him as a reference because that footage is so interesting. And you see a vertical hold wave go from the bottom to the top of the moon, and you realize it's not the camera. And then you go, wait, why is there a vertical hold wave going through the moon? Wait, why am I even saying that? Because that's not possible. You're basically saying that the moon, there's something, either the moon is a projection of some kind, or the moon is projecting something that we are seeing. And that's the only explanation for it. I mean, we all know what a vertical, if you're old enough anyway, to know what a vertical hold wave is. And granted, those waves have gotten much more subtle over the years, especially with HD technology and the different refresh rates. But to see a resolution issue in the moon itself is mind-blowing. I mean, you stare at this thing, you can watch it 100 times, you still don't get it after watching it. You're going, what in the world is happening, so to speak?
And people go check out Crow 777. Check out all you got to do is Google the lunar wave and go check it out. And he's not the only one that's caught this, by the way. There have been other people around the world who have filmed the same anomaly on the moon. I want to go back to the callers here. We got Shane. He's been holding for a little while. Shane, you're live on the Awakening Liberty Show. Great to have you here.
Thank you, Sean and
Mark.
Mark, hey, thanks. And as I understand it, the Chinese are going to go to the moon to harvest helium-3 and helium-4. Do you know about that?
I've heard.
Go ahead, caller.
And also I believe that. Right now, we're going into a golden age. And the Chinese are going to go to the moon to harvest helium-3 and helium-4. Do you know about that? I've heard. Also, I believe that right now we're going into a golden age. And the Chinese are going to go to the moon to harvest helium-3 and helium-4. Do you know about that? Do you believe that?
I believe we have the potential to go into a golden age, but I don't think it'll have anything to do with helium-3. That's a Richard Hoagland concept where there are lots of people living on the moon and Mars and Jupiter, and there's all these bases everywhere. But I do believe now. Do I believe that's true? No, because I don't think that you can actually land on anything even close to the moon. But what I do believe is that the golden age potentially is coming. I mean, because I'm going to go with the glass half full. Either you're going to go with because you could either say that the authority is going to do a major depopulation thing on the planet, which is very, very possible and more likely than the other, or you could say that if we find out where we truly are in this world and in this universe, that we band together and we become a much better civilization, and we become a big family. And we have a chance to move forward and live up to our potential. Now, am I being optimistic? Yeah, maybe, but there's too many other people preaching doom and gloom. No offense to you, Sean. So I'm going to go the other route and say that we really have a chance to do something. So golden age, yes, I do think very possible.
Well, understand, I don't preach doom and gloom because I do believe that God's got this under control. And this
there you go.
Tobacco,
yeah.
Psychopaths that are in control. The Bible tells us that he's going to take care of them, and they will be wiped off, and we will have a golden age. I highly agree with that. Now, the caller was talking about going to the moon. Obviously, the Chinese, apparently they have actually a rover on the moon now. Why won't they turn a camera back towards the Earth? I don't.
Yeah. The Chinese, in case you guys haven't heard, has supposedly had a Mars rover probe on the moon since 2013, and yet they're not going over. The only thing up there, if you believe that we went to the moon, and you can't, you got to give up NASA right away, is that they would go over to the Sea of Tranquility and park next to the American flag, or tip it over, or accidentally knock it over, or do something, take a jab at the Americans, say, oh yeah, we're here and you're not. But they don't. As a matter of fact, nobody's been to the moon ever since the Americans claimed they've been to the moon. And I know it's tougher for us, being in the United States, because it's a matter of national pride. But you got to give it up. NASA is the first. I'm not just saying that the Earth isn't what it appears to be. I'm saying that the entire NASA program, since its inception in 1958, the only reason it was even created was to hide the world from which you live. It was there just to give you just to control the skies, so that you and your private company, and no matter how much money you had, wouldn't be allowed to go up there, because they're the gatekeepers.
Shane, I want to thank you for your call. Have you got any more comments?
Right now, let's see here. Yeah, I'll probably. Thanks for answering my call. Thanks.
Absolutely, Shane, and thank you for tuning into the Awakening Liberty Show. It's always great to see you in the chat room. He's always listening to the show, and he's a big TFR guy. So here's something for you, Mark. And this has been puzzling me, because it's been going around in my head. Now,
sure.
I interviewed Massimo Mazzucco, the Italian filmmaker who did a bunch of great films. He did The New American Century. He's also working on a new film called American Moon, which is about the alleged moon landings. Mm-hmm. And that show, we went through some fascinating down the rabbit hole stuff, and it blew me away. But I started thinking, because I don't believe we went to the moon either. I think it was impossible. And right now, you've got NASA basically saying that they cannot send anybody out into deep space because the radiation is so dangerous.
Yeah.
In fact, it's more dangerous than they thought before. And if it's a problem now, it couldn't have been a problem then. There's this big contradiction going on.
Yeah,
However, the flat Earth model states that the sun and the moon are basically 3,000 miles above us. Now, maybe they did go to the moon. This is something came into my mind. Maybe they did go to the moon and realize that it was only 3,000 miles up. And they've been hiding that from us as well, because if it was only 3,000 miles up, maybe they could have gotten there. What do you think about that, Mark?
I've been asked that one before, and no, I think they knew all along how high it was, because when they were doing atomic weapon testing from 1958 until 1962, both the United States and the Soviet Union, I think they were mapping out the sky, and I think they knew exactly how high they could go and where these objects were. So landing on a moon on an object that was only 30-something miles wide, when you weren't exactly sure what it was made out of in the first place, not necessarily. I don't think they could have probably detected the lunar waves, but maybe they had lasers back then. Maybe they figured out that there was no structure to land on. something, because if you were going to land on it, you'd have to shoot for the top because you weren't going to take a chance of landing on the side and hoping that gravity, didn't work or if it worked the way you thought it worked, you weren't going to take any chances. So no, I don't think they went anywhere along those lines. I think the whole thing was produced, and they made mistakes in the 60s, which they didn't think would get caught, like the perfect pictures and the shadows and the blast crater that wasn't there and the moon buggy that got put together miraculously, all these fun things. I think they didn't anticipate the internet and HD television and social media, and so they just got caught in their own lie. And the Van Allen belt, by the way, you mentioned, was a perfect example of that, which was you have a NASA employee, Van Allen himself, which announces the belt, says, "Oh yeah, by the way, it's a band of radiation, super, super deadly." In 1958, but only a few years later, they're saying he has to retract the deadliness of it and say, "Oh yeah, we can get through it. Just go real fast. Just hit the gas and you can get through this thing." And then something really strange happens, which is, they made all these round trips, Apollo 8, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, round trips to this thing. Nobody died of radiation sickness. Nobody got cancer. The capsule wasn't contaminated. Everything seemed to be just great. And then in 2014, NASA puts a video out. It's out there right now. You guys can look it up. It's super easy to find. Just type in Orion Trial by Fire, which is It's a little video that the NASA made for television where they talk about, and you probably watched it, where they talk about going, they don't know how they're going to get through the Van Allen belt, so they're not going to send people through it. And what are you talking about? That's 50 years ago. Why would you have problems getting through it now? Especially once the shielding is so basic. It's either lead or it's gold. It's got to be one of those two things. And they still won't say what shielding they used during Apollo, if they used anything. They just said, "Oh wait, we just went through it." It's like, how did you get through it? Even if you went through it real fast on the way out, when you were coming back from the moon, you're going to come back real slow because you didn't have a propulsion system to do any decent speed from the moon. So how are you having problems with this? And they won't answer it. They've gotten themselves into a real. It's not necessarily painted themselves into a corner, but the old saying, the lies in the spider web and how it just keeps getting worse and worse. They've gotten themselves in a real jam where they don't know how to get out of it, and which is why I think eventually they're going to have to wrap this thing up, either with some sort of big staged event. They've got to get the attention away from NASA now. Even if they have to crash the ISS, that'd be, it sounds desperate, and it's like, oh, that's the weirdest, stupidest thing I've ever heard. It's like, really? Because you're listening to a flat Earth broadcast. I lead with weird. So the bringing the ISS down, that's nothing. I totally think that's doable. And they said just last year that they're going to try to close this thing down and do a moon base instead of going. Yeah, they're not going to be able to fake that either.
Yeah.
And now, go ahead.
What blows me away, Mark, is that they've spent trillions of dollars on this fake space program, and now they're talking about sending people to Mars. And they're going to do it again. This has got to be one of the biggest heists in history.
It is, but they do spend some money. I will say that. You do. NASA does employ people, and they do turn wrenches, and they do build things. But the heist is that the things don't actually do anything. So you're paying people like you probably heard me mention this before. My next door neighbor out in Boulder, his name was Wayne Ottinger, and he was like the wrench turner at NASA. Back during Mercury and Gemini and Apollo. And he all the Apollo astronauts that are still alive. He knows them on a first name basis. Plaques all over his walls, and he was like the guy. In fact, he was the guy that designed the prototype for the LEM, the lunar module. And he knows nothing. He is a proud, couldn't be more proud American to work for NASA. But why wouldn't he be? He did his job. He was an engineer. He built things. These things were put on a rocket, and the rockets were shot up. Where that rocket went? Oh, there's your heist. The rocket went nowhere. It was dumped into the ocean. In fact, by the way, did it strike anybody as odd that they don't even land the capsules in the ocean anymore? They land them out in the middle of the Russian plains, on dirt. And they hit hard too. And it's like, why all the ocean stuff? Why do this soft splash down in the ocean? And the what?
It's fiction on fiction. They just keep it's like all the world's a stage, and it's all theater.
Well, that they can control the airspace a lot more. So now, and you can watch this in some of the close-ups where as this thing's landing, these Russian Russian gunships are circling the area. They're not circling to make sure it has a soft landing. They're circling to make sure there's no witnesses, to people prying eyes. They don't want people. They don't want people in yachts, because nowadays it's different than the old days. You could get a yacht and go out to the retrieval zone if you wanted to, if you had the money, but they don't want that. And they don't want to police boats. So it's like, you know what, let's just put it in a place where all the airspace is controlled and you can't get in without certain passports. Yeah,
definitely. And I got one more thing I want to cover, because this has fascinated me as well. I mean, I spent a lot of time looking through telescopes and looking at what appears to be spherical planets within our solar system that we've been told.
Yeah.
And this has always bugged me, because in looking at flat Earth, we look at Jupiter. It's enormous.
Yeah.
And if we are in an enclosed world, I mean, I've had this question put to me, and I've actually had it going through my own head. Mm-hmm. That is it possible that we are on a globe, but it is a lot bigger than we are being told? In fact, we are obviously, they did Operation Fishbowl. They were doing high altitude nuclear testing. Operation Fishbowl. Why did they call it that?
Why would you name it that? Yeah.
Yes. That's just a big giveaway. So is it possible that we are on a globe, because we do see them in the sky, whether they're real or not, projections or whatever? Is it possible that we are on a globe, but we have been quarantined? We have been put inside of an enclosed environment for whatever reason, and it's much smaller. And maybe that's why we cannot, we can't measure the curvature.
Yeah, it's possible that, and quite a few people have suggested that, and that what he's getting at is that we're on a flat piece of land that is on a much, much bigger sphere, similar to, say, Jupiter, if Jupiter was not a gaseous planet. Yeah, of course it's possible. But why would you – the argument I try to throw back at people, and believe me, I appreciate God's design as much as anybody, but where I say that because people say, well, isn't there space outside of this? Let's say we are in a dome. Is there space outside of it? I go, why does there have to be space outside of it? If you're faking space on the inside, like a planetarium, it could be anything you wanted. In fact, you could be in a planetarium inside a much bigger building. The Rob Skiba argument, where we were a dome inside kind of like a big cake box, that explains the four corners of the Earth and the four winds and all that, that we're actually we're under a spherical, a domed object that is actually in a square object, because machines, and when you're designing things, it's always easier to design things in squares, in right angles, than it is using, curved lines. So it's possible, but I still believe in efficiency and design, and that is, yes, God is all powerful and God can create all things, but I don't think God wastes anything either. So wasting huge amounts of space between places, I wouldn't think you'd have to do it. The old saying is, you fake it till you make it. If you're faking big, meaning if you're faking space and the argument, because you've said Jupiter, people have said, well, when I go out with binoculars or a telescope, I can look at Jupiter and it looks pretty big. It looks like it looks spherical. And I go, take that same pair of binoculars, go into the Hayden Planetarium run by Neil deGrasse Tyson. I go and look at Jupiter in there. When you look at it with binoculars, does Jupiter look real, more real, or less real? And it's rhetorical, because it doesn't make any difference, because it's fake, and it's fake because you're inside the planetarium. But if you're outside the planetarium, how do you know you're actually not in another planetarium? See what I mean? If you build a structure big enough, can you fool everyone? And the answer, it feels a little Twilight Zone-y when I say this, but yes, not only is it possible, but likely, because we're easily fooled. We are so easy to fool when it comes to illusions. I know nobody likes to be tricked, nobody likes to be lied to, nobody likes to be fooled, but we're susceptible to it. And if it was done again, the Truman Show, not hard to conceptualize. It fooled Truman. How many people could you fool in there? Could you fool a whole town if you made it big enough? Could you fool a whole country? How big? We're only talking about resources and money and advanced technology. Could you fool everybody? I think you could.
And I would encourage people to go check out Rob Skiba. And I regret that he was unable to make the show today. Obviously, it's Easter Sunday. But he does a breakdown about the Truman Show. And really, it's a fascinating. Just look it up, Flat Earth and the Truman Show on YouTube. I would encourage everybody to go watch that. It's just it's going to blow your mind and it'll make you scratch your head.
Yeah.
We're running out of time here, Mark, but I wanted to give you the chance to talk about enclosedworld.com, give everybody the website, and also where they can find all of your videos that you're making. And obviously, we know you're on TFR, so
of course, yeah. Strange World on TFR and enclosedworld.com. And I'm also on Flat Earth and Other Hot Potatoes with Patricia Steer. And the network, the Flat Earth Network, is going to come up pretty soon. I'll be on the Flat Earth Show on that. The book, which just came out at the beginning of March, is literally called Flat Earth Clues. And that is on Amazon. The Audible version is also called Flat Earth Clues. And that is on iTunes as well, and I think and on Audible, and it's being translated. If English isn't your first language, it's being translated into French and Spanish and Russian, and just pick it. It's going to be translated. So yeah. It's out there, and again, it's a gateway. Don't just look at my stuff. Follow it up if you're a devout Christian. Follow it up with Rob Skiba's stuff at testingtheglobe.com, which is a fantastic website. Goes over every chapter and verse. Which, by the way, I've got to throw in there real quick, which is something that really caught my eye when I was looking at NASA real hard. And everybody knows who Wernher von Braun is, if you know NASA. He's the father of NASA, ex-Nazi scientist that worked for the Reich and came over and did all this stuff and worked with Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson and Nixon and all those guys. And on his headstone, you thought, again, his headstone would have been real, pronounced, him staring at the sky, holding a big cement rocket in his hand, something in brass. And instead, it's just his name, the year he was born, the year he died, and then Psalm 19:1. And I had to look it up. I didn't know what Psalm 19:1 was. And it says, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Why is the father of rocket scientists, when you make the joke, oh, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, that's the guy, the rocket scientist. Why is the rocket scientist quoting Psalms on his headstone? Why is he reaching out from the grave to talk about the firmament, the dome? That's because I think he knew. I think he knew, and he kept it a secret all the way to his dying day in 1977. And I think there's a few other people out there that know, and I'm waiting for somebody to come talk to me about it.
Yeah, because and I find that very, very interesting because being a Christian, again, I've gone back to that, and they talk about the firmament, and my whole view about the shape of the earth, and really, I can't prove it either way, but I can go to the Bible and I can stay biblical about it, and I look at the firmament. In fact, somebody not too long ago made the comment about and I can't recall the verse, but it's talking about God created the heavens and the earth, and he made the earth his footstool. Yeah. And she was using that actually as a flat earth debunk, and I said, here's God, this omnipotent, all-knowing God. You would think he'd be smart enough not to make a footstool that was a ball.
There you go. unless it's not a ball, unless it's got four corners, unless it's square. With a ball, with a kind of a curved thing and a circular thing inside it. I mean, I'm not going to be able to do the justice that Rob does, but I mean, look at Joshua, where Joshua asked God to hold the sun and the moon in the sky for an extra day so he could slay more enemies. That's really tough to do in a solar system model. Really easy to do in an enclosed model. And of course, the all famous one that I put in the clues, but I did not put by name, which is the Tower of Babel. It's like, how does the Tower of Babel even make sense on a spinning ball? Where are they going? They're not going. It's spinning two different ways. It's rotating and it's going through the solar system. But in an enclosed model, an enclosed world, they know exactly where they're going. They're going to the ceiling, and that's what the whole story. It's not a long story. That's what the story says. God says, "Holy smokes, they're going to make it to the roof." Yeah, we can't have that. Let's smite them. And come the languages.
And the Bible also tells us that the second coming of man, that all of humanity see him descending from the heaven. How is that possible on a ball earth?
Exactly. I had a caller call in a different show and say, well, it's possible on a globe earth because everyone's going to have cell phones, and so it'll be retransmitted. I'm going, yeah, that's not exactly how I interpreted, though, because, it doesn't make sense unless it's on a flat plane. Then it was revealed to everybody at the same time, and then everybody can't. If you don't tell them they're on if they're on a flat surface, wouldn't make any sense, because then people get real confused. Like, how is a person in Australia seeing the same thing I am in the northern hemisphere? How's that even happening? Yeah, and there's so many others. Rob does a wonderful job breaking it down, and even though I know he's a baller skeptic too, but he's that's just because he's holding on so that he can escape at the last minute if something happens.
Exactly, Mark. It's always great to talk to you. It's just awesome to break words with you and talk about flat Earth. I love what you're doing. Keep doing what you're doing, and keep getting people to scratch their head. I want to thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, man. It's a pleasure.
Most definitely. Everybody, Mark Sargent, enclosedworld.com. Go check out Flat Earth Clues on YouTube. Definitely it will make you scratch your head. And then go do some more searching. As Mark says, don't take our words for this. Just go do your own research. We have got to get people to start critically thinking for themselves if we have any chance of breaking this oppression that the humanity is being faced with. Because these people are wackos. And if they are hiding things like flat Earth, obviously you got to question everything. And that's where I, like I said, to my dismay, I start to question everything. I look at the agenda behind it. I look what they're trying to do. I see what they're trying to do. And it's disheartening to say the least. But, that's what my show's about. It's about trying to get people to think for themselves. So go definitely do your own research. Check out Flat Earth. And if you decide to dismiss it, dismiss it. I did that 10 years ago. So I'm back to this point. And like I said, I'm a ball Earth skeptic. I can't prove it either way. But we got some big fish to fry definitely in this world. So coming up next week, again, we're going to have James Freed. We're going to be talking about Nibiru and Planet X. Is this fact, fantasy, or fiction? And then that will be Saturday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. And then on Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific time, Vincent Von Doom will be joining me to talk about preparedness in our communities and how we can help each other in the event of disasters, a full-fledged financial collapse, or obviously these people might try to, God forbid, they go and try to kill everybody. So let's tune in then, Sunday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Until then, may God bless you and keep you.